The mechanics department at the academy was notorious for a reason. It admitted only alpha students, demanding a level of physical intensity and academic rigor that broke the weak. It was known as the Devil's Major, a place where future engineers of war were forged in sweat and steel. I had been feeling under the weather lately, a heaviness in my chest that made every breath a conscious effort. During the long-distance endurance run, I decided to slack off, deliberately letting my pace slow until I drifted to the back of the formation. The rhythmic thud of combat boots on the track was hypnotic, but my focus was broken by a scent drifting through the air. It was the specific, cloying aroma of sweet milk, a pheromone signature that did not belong here. Ryan gradually caught up to me. He was wearing his athletic uniform in a way that defied regulation, the fabric tied loosely around his waist to accentuate the slender curve of his hips. We were only on the 17th lap, yet he looked as though he were on the verge of collapse. His teeth bit into his lower lip, turning the skin white, and his beautiful, delicate face was drained of all color. I picked up my pace just a fraction, easily overtaking him. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw his body sway violently. He looked at me with a gaze full of venom, his eyes burning with a sudden, inexplicable rage. I offered a faint, dismissive smile. Why did an Omega insist on competing with an Alpha in physical endurance? It was biology, not malice. But in the next second, Ryan suddenly clenched his fists. He surged forward, running with a desperate, self-destructive energy, as if his life depended on beating me. We crossed the finish line at the exact same moment. "I am not worse than you," Ryan screamed, his voice cracking. Immediately after that fierce declaration, he coughed, and droplets of bright red blood splattered from his lips. His body went limp, all energy vanishing in an instant, and he fell backward like a drifting feather, plummeting vulnerably into the darkness. Before I could react, a powerful force slammed into my shoulder, knocking me aside. It was George, my boyfriend. He rushed past me, his arms outstretched, and caught Ryan before he hit the ground. When George looked up at me, his eyes were bloodshot and filled with accusation. "Jason, you knew Ryan was struggling," George growled, his voice thick with misplaced protectiveness. "Why did you have to compete with him? Couldn't you have just let him win?" I stood there, panting, the sweat cooling on my skin. George and I had grown up together. Although we both presented as alphas, we had fallen in love and started dating, defying the typical social norms. George had always claimed to despise weak omegas, finding their fragility annoying. That was until his roommate, Ryan, appeared. Ryan was competitive about everything. He was a dazzling, controversial existence among the freshmen. Eventually, Ryan had failed to inject his suppressant properly, exposing his secret to the dorm. I remembered how he had clenched his jaw, tears in his eyes, begging us to keep his secret. "Mechanics is my lifelong dream," Ryan had pleaded. "I must study. I don't want to be like those other omegas, bound by marriage and family for a lifetime. Please, I'm begging you." I had tried to reason with him. "Ryan, omegas can study. There are plenty of majors. But mechanics really doesn't allow omegas. It's not discrimination, it's physiological. It's as strange as a girl insisting on using the men's restroom. The physical demands will kill you." I didn't expect George to buy into the sob story. "Ryan is different from those other omegas," George had said, his voice filled with a newfound admiration. From that day on, Ryan became a shadow in George's life. George's clothes began to carry the lingering scent of sweet milk, a smell that made me irritable and nauseous. Ryan would lean on George's shoulder like a bro, making jokes that blurred the lines of propriety. "Your boyfriend is so sensitive and suspicious, just like an omega," Ryan would say with a laugh. "Dude, I could never date you. I'm independent and sober. I just want a career, okay?" George would laugh, charmed by the performance. It was as if he had become a different person, fully accepting and trusting Ryan. Ryan was competitive, constantly getting himself hurt to prove a point, revealing a fragile side that triggered George's hero complex. George would instinctively pity him, admire him, and take care of him. Just like now, George looked at me as if I were a venomous snake, a schemer who had bullied the weak. After venting his anger, he scooped Ryan up into a bridal carry and sprinted toward the infirmary, not sparing me a single backward glance. Our relationship suddenly felt incredibly ridiculous. Jason, you don't look right. Are you okay? The voice belonged to Lucas, our class monitor. My rapid, wheezing breathing had caught his attention. He walked over to pat my shoulder, but my instincts were haywire. I reacted as if electrocuted, grabbing his arm and flipping him over my shoulder in a brutal throw. Lucas hit the ground with a thud. Whoa. Damn, you're fierce. Are you in your rut? Go back and rest. Don't hurt anyone. An alpha's rut, the susceptible period, made us repulsed by same-sex touch, irritable, and violent. The instinct was to mark everything as one's own territory. Every rut I had spent with George had been torture. He rarely let me bite him. The sensation of being marked by another alpha was humiliating for him. Sometimes I would sneak a bite, and he would fly into a rage, fighting me until we both passed out from exhaustion. That was how we muddled through. George seems to have taken Ryan to the infirmary, Lucas said, picking himself up and dusting off his pants. He said he couldn't leave. Can you make it back alone? I'm fine, I rasped. Lucas kindly escorted me to the dormitory door. He knew George and I were a couple, and he even tried calling George on my behalf. I waved Lucas away, needing solitude. The rapid breathing in my chest hadn't subsided. My throat began to itch violently. I realized this wasn't just exhaustion. My old asthma was flaring up. I stumbled to my desk, yanked open the drawer, and found my medicine bottle. I tossed a pill into my mouth, swallowing dry. I turned around and started grabbing everything George had ever given me. I didn't have the patience to argue about details. I was going to break up with him directly. I was done wasting my time. Suddenly, a wave of suffocation crashed over me like a collapsing building. I fell heavily onto the tiled floor. My hands clawed at my throat, desperate for air that wouldn't come. My body began to convulse uncontrollably. How could this be? I had just taken my medicine. Unless the medicine was the problem? I tried to scream, but no sound came out. As my consciousness began to fade, I fumbled blindly with my phone, unlocking it and dialing the emergency contact. I didn't care who it was. I just needed help. The call connected. Jason, stop making a scene. George's voice came through, impatient and cold. I really can't leave right now. The infirmary is full of alphas, and I'm afraid something will happen to Ryan. If you're in your rut, just go bite someone random. Don't be such a dramatic alpha. The line went dead with a soft click. The sensation of dying was not peaceful. My consciousness was trapped in a body that refused to function. I couldn't breathe, no matter how hard I tried. Sometime later, I felt the sensation of being lifted. I was in a hospital. Doctors and nurses swarmed around me. Why is this alpha still in a rut? Does he have no partner? A nurse shouted. The emergency room was flooded with my leaking pheromones, aggressive and chaotic. Even the alpha doctor's hands were shaking as he tried to work. Switch to the maximum dose of suppressant, the doctor ordered. The icy needle pierced my arm, but at that exact moment, a warm, grounding presence enveloped me. Wait, a deep voice commanded. I'll soothe him. Maybe the asthma medication, the real kind, was finally working, or maybe it was this new presence. Fresh air slowly trickled into my burning lungs. A stranger, a tall man, lifted me up. He unbuttoned his collar with one hand, exposing the column of his neck. He carefully released some of his own pheromones. He was an alpha too, but his scent, it was different. I didn't hesitate. Driven by instinct and the terror of death, I buried my face in his neck and bit down hard. I wanted to mark him. I wanted him to belong to me. My teeth pierced his skin. The scent of his pheromones hit me, a choking, powerful smell of kerosene mixed with oud wood. It exploded in my blood, aggressive and dominant, yet it inexplicably calmed my frantic heart. A second before I lost consciousness completely, I heard the man's husky whisper. The little guy is pretty fierce. I sank into his embrace and fell into a deep, dark sleep, feeling an indescribable sense of safety. When I woke up, the hospital room was quiet. My father, an Omega, was outside talking to the doctor. A sound came from the corner of the room. George rose from the sofa, his face cold, and walked to my bedside. Jason, I didn't expect you to sink this low, George said, his voice dripping with disappointment. Just because I didn't accompany you through your rut, you pull a stunt like this? Acting like this only makes me hate you more. I closed my eyes and took several deep breaths. Then, I opened them and hooked my finger at him. George frowned, but leaned in closer. Feeling bad now? You deserve it. Did you think this method would make me feel sorry for? I ripped the foredrip from my hand and swung. My fist connected with his nose with a sickening crunch. Blood sprayed instantly. George crashed face first onto the tiled floor. Feel sorry, I hissed, my voice raspy but steady. I'll make you feel pain all over. From today on, every time I see you, I'm going to beat you. That day, George and I had the biggest fight of our lives, followed by a cold war that froze the air in our dorm room. The lab results came back. My pills had been swapped. Our dormitory was a 4-person suite. 1 bed was empty. The remaining 3 were occupied by me, George, and Ryan. It was obvious who had tampered with my medication. But there were no cameras in the dorm. Ryan would never admit it. Accusing him without evidence would only make me look petty. Don't drag me into your couple's quarrel. Ryan shouted the next morning, lifting his chin and glaring at me. He straightened his back, grabbed his book bag, and marched out to class. Behind him, George looked at me with horror. Jason, your medicine? George stammered. You had an attack that day because your medicine was swapped? That's attempted murder. George rushed forward, trying to grab my hand. Jason, I smashed my fist into the bridge of his nose again. The loud thud made Ryan, who had paused at the door, freeze. I smiled faintly and walked over to Ryan, reaching out to zip up his backpack for him. I haven't said anything yet. Why are you so guilty? Ryan flinched. I just want to tell you. I whispered, close to his ear. If I had died that day, the culprit would be charged with murder. Since I didn't die, it's attempted murder. Both mean prison time. I will investigate this to the end. The blood drained from Ryan's face. He tried to compose himself. Don't target me just because I'm an Omega. I just want to study. I don't want to fight with you. Anyone could have entered our dorm. Ryan insisted, his voice rising in panic. He looked at George, his eyes shimmering with practiced vulnerability, swaying as if he might faint into George's arms. But Ryan didn't know one crucial detail. To protect Ryan, a vulnerable Omega, George had changed our door and window locks to the newest, most secure biometric models weeks ago. George never allowed outsiders to step foot inside. If anyone had business, they handled it in the hallway. George looked at Ryan, and for the first time, the adoration in his eyes cracked. For the entire professional theory lecture that morning, George didn't say a single word to Ryan. Of course, I didn't speak to him either. The regular professor was on leave. The substitute was a young male professor named Dennis. He usually taught the advanced junior classes. Dennis walked in, commanding the room instantly. Black jeans wrapped around long, powerful legs. His gray shirt was ironed to perfection, the collar just high enough to obscure half of a pheromone suppression patch. Broad shoulders, a narrow waist, sword-like eyebrows, and eyes like cold stars. If this were any other department, he would be the idol of every student. But in the eyes of the alphas and mechanics, he was a threat. He felt like a predator. George spent the entire class texting me. When I ignored every message, he blocked my path by the podium after the bell rang. He looked shaken. He apologized over and over again. I'll find out the truth about Ryan and deal with it, George said, his eyes rimmed with red. I didn't know you suffered such a grievance. Give me a chance to make it up to you, okay? Did I not say I would beat you every time I saw you? I asked calmly. I dropped my bag and rolled my shoulders. Just as I was about to swing, a large hand grabbed my wrist from behind. Student Jason, a deep voice rumbled. Fighting in the classroom is frowned upon. Come to my office. We need to chat. Dennis stood on the podium, looking down at me. His tall figure completely overshadowed me, creating an oppressive sense of dominance. Before I could speak, George flared up. I have things to discuss with Jason. Who are you to take a student away alone? You're just a substitute teacher. Dennis clicked his tongue impatiently. He looked down at me, then raised a hand and ripped the suppression patch off his neck. The choking scent of kerosene drifted through the room, underlaid with a subtle, bitter note of oud wood. It was clean, sharp, and terrifying. It froze both me and George in place. That scent. It was the scent of the man I had marked. Are Jason and I close? Dennis asked, his voice silky and dangerous. I suppose so. I mean, he bit me. He marked me as his property. Do you think that counts as close? I gasped. The stranger in the hospital. It was him. Alphas cannot be marked by their own kind. Being injected with another alpha's pheromones is painful and humiliating. It takes days to metabolize. George hated it when my scent lingered on him. His pride and cleanliness obsession never allowed it. But now, George's eyes turned red with hatred. He grabbed my arm. Why does he have your pheromones? I'm your boyfriend. Ex-boyfriend, I corrected coldly. Do you want to get hit again? As I spoke, the scent of sour wine, my pheromone, began to spread in the air, a reaction to the stress. George, losing control, released his own pheromones in a tidal wave of rage, trying to suppress everyone in the room. The classroom cleared out instantly. I choked, my knees buckling. Dennis smiled. He closed his reference book with a snap. In the next second, an even more violent kerosene scent exploded in the air. It didn't just compete with George's wine scent, it devoured it. It was a prime alpha, an S-class. George turned pale. His body began to tremble uncontrollably, suppressed so heavily he couldn't speak. I was sweating cold bullets, my limbs turning to jelly. A strong arm wrapped around my waist, pulling me into a firm chest. Student George, Dennis said coolly. You seem to smell only of milk. Do you really have a connection with Jason? Clearly, I am the one he marked. I am his. So move aside. The fear induced by the S-class pheromones paralyzed me. I let out a broken whimper, which only earned a low chuckle from Dennis. I was 6 feet tall, yet Dennis lifted me with one arm as easily as a rag doll. With his other hand holding his book, he calmly walked out of the classroom. As the kerosene scent faded, George collapsed to his knees, his shirt soaked in sweat. He gasped for air, humiliated and enraged. After a long silence, a soft, cold hand tugged at George's shirt. George, help me. I feel so strange. Ryan had stayed in the classroom to spy. The bombardment of aggressive alpha pheromones had triggered him. He was going into heat. Dennis carried me into his private office and set me down on his wide mahogany desk. Once my head cleared, I jumped off and started apologizing. I even grabbed a piece of paper and a pen. I'm so sorry, Professor. Just write a number. I'll pay. Dennis unbuttoned his cuffs, glancing at me with amusement. Do you think I charge by the hour? I froze. I don't know how to explain. It was an accident. Dennis leaned in, trapping me against the wall with his arms. Student, you bit me. You have to take responsibility. Didn't health class teach you what comes next? You are my first man. I've kept myself clean for 30 years. Now I smell like you, and everyone knows it. You plan to dismiss me with a check? His breath was hot on my face. I just broke up, I stammered. I don't want to rush into. So what do we do? Dennis pressed his lips together, his dark eyes dancing with suppressed laughter. My innocence is ruined. If my lover's scent just disappears, people will talk. They'll say the mechanics professor got dumped in a week. I have a reputation. We need to date for at least a year before a peaceful breakup. I scratched my head frantically. He was an S-class alpha and a professor. I didn't dare refuse him. So, you mean I have to? Dennis shrugged. He unbuttoned the second and third buttons of his shirt, revealing the fading bite mark on his collarbone. We just started dating. We should be in the honeymoon phase. The oud would send is fading, isn't it? He tilted his head, offering his neck. Just bite me again. Come on. We're both men, both alphas. No one is losing out. I calmed my racing heart. I leaned forward, gripping his arm, and pressed my lips to his neck. Fine. As long as you're okay with it. As my teeth pierced his skin, both our phones buzzed. Then, the school group chats exploded. Asterisk, big news. Mechanics student Ryan is an Omega. He's in heat and crawling through the halls. Look, asterisk Ryan had tried to seek George's protection in the classroom. He had curled up at George's feet, weeping. But this time, George had simply called the emergency containment unit and walked away. I really hate disgusting, troublesome Omegas like you, George had said. Am I your father? Do I have to manage everything for you? The sweet, milky scent had exploded from the classroom to the entire building. Alphas everywhere were affected. To survive, Ryan had to run toward the open grounds, crawling on his hands and knees, stripped of all dignity. George found me in the crowd watching the spectacle. You wanted to see if I would help him, right? George asked desperately. I'm clear-headed now. I feel nothing for him. I told you, I have a physiological revulsion to weak Omegas. You're too loud, I said, watching the scene. I'm just checking if Ryan is still conscious. The police just sent word. They found half a fingerprint on the pill bottle. He's going to be investigated. George's face went white. Overnight, Ryan's secret was known to everyone. He had violated federal law by tampering with my medication. However, the Omega Protection Act was his shield. It stated that Omegas between 18 and 30 must produce at least one child before they can be incarcerated. So, Ryan only received a school disciplinary notice. When he returned to school, he spun the narrative. He launched a rights movement, claiming he was a victim of gender discrimination in admissions. I admit I made a mistake, Ryan announced from a stage on the first day of our junior year. But I was jealous. Why are alphas born elites? 8 years ago, Ethan became the first Omega in the mecha department. I will follow in his footsteps. He wore light makeup, looking noble and defiant. But he didn't understand something fundamental. Ethan was a genius commander. Ryan wanted to be a mechanic. Mechanics are the lifeblood of the mecha. On the battlefield, when supplies run out, the final material used to repair the machine is the mechanic himself. An Omega's fragile bone density made them unsuitable for the physical toll. Before junior year classes began, the mechanics department held a survival assessment. For people per group. 48 hours to cross a tropical jungle. No supplies. We had to retrieve a mecha blueprint to pass. I drew straws. My team, George, Ryan, and Lucas. We changed into black tactical gear. Jason, those legs, Lucas whistled. You look good, even in a sack. Jason has always been handsome, George chimed in eagerly. That's why I fell for him. Shut up, I said. You look pathetic trying to win me back. Ryan had already started walking. The uniform hung loosely on him, cinched tight at the waist. He wasn't wearing a suppression patch. The scent of milk drifted back to us. I just want to pass, Ryan called out. Can you guys hurry up? Look at him pretending, George scoffed. So cheap. Yet, George's eyes followed Ryan. Every time Ryan stumbled, George mocked him. But if another alpha got too close, George would chase them away. It was sickening. 20 hours later, we reached a swamp. We had to use vines to swing across. It required the weight of 2 people to stabilize the vine. George and Lucas went first. When they signaled from the other side, I grabbed the vine. Let's go, Ryan said. I smiled coldly. I grabbed him by the back of his collar. You forgot. We have a debt to settle. This was the only blind spot since the investigation. I pulled out a bottle of pills, the fake ones he had swapped mine with. Ryan's face twisted in terror. I tied him to the vine with me, then forced his jaw open and poured the entire bottle into his mouth. Eat up, I whispered. He gagged and struggled, tears streaming down his face. I kicked off, swinging us across the swamp. The wind drowned out his screams. When we landed, Ryan vomited until he was dry heaving, curled into a ball of misery. He's just scared of heights, I told George and Lucas. We don't have time. Move. We marched on. We found the checkpoint, but the blueprint wasn't there. A heavy rain began to fall. We needed shelter. We should split up to find the blueprint, Ryan suggested, grabbing my arm. Jason and I will look together. I shook him off and walked into the dense brush. A few minutes later, I heard a scream. My leg. It's broken. Jason, help me. I kept walking. Jason, Ryan screamed. I know you hear me. Are you going to bring personal grudges to the battlefield? Are you going to abandon a teammate? I looked down on you. I stopped. Suddenly, the scent of milk exploded in the humid air. Ryan had cut his own arm, releasing pheromones to signal distress. The Omega pheromones hit my brain like a sledgehammer. I stumbled, my mind blanking for a few seconds. Ryan lunged from the shadows. He didn't have a broken leg. He tackled me, pushing me toward a hidden, deep pit in the jungle floor. I really hate you, he hissed, his face contorted. You're an alpha, but you're so pretty. You have money. George loves you. Why do you get everything? I hope you die. He shoved me. I fell into the darkness, hitting the bottom hard. I was unconscious for 30 minutes. When I woke, George and Lucas were there. They had jumped down to find me. I saw Jason fall. Ryan was sobbing to them. I couldn't save him, so I cut my arm to call you with pheromones. Thank God you came. Shut up, you stink, George snapped, though he was tearing his sleeve to bandage Ryan's arm. I stood up, pain radiating through my back. I saw the blueprint on the way down. Grab it. Let's go. Ryan wiped his tears, a small, triumphant smile playing on his lips. Next to the blueprint were 2 chocolate bars, our only food. George snatched them immediately. He peeled one and handed it. Not to me, but to Ryan. You're a burden, George muttered to him. Eat this so you don't faint. We climbed out and continued. The rain turned into a deluge. Lucas built a shelter, and we huddled inside. My back wound was likely infected. I was burning up. I passed out again. When I woke hours later, George and Ryan were walking back into the shelter. Ryan's face was flushed, chocolate crumbs on his lips. It was obvious what they had been doing while I slept. Jason, you look terrible, Ryan cooed. Let me help you walk. Get lost, I said. Jason, stop being difficult, George said. Ryan saved you. We are teammates. I punched George in the face. He says something, and you believe it? If I said I was his father, would you believe that too? You guys still have energy to fight? A voice drawled from the darkness. Dennis stepped into the light. He was wearing a black tank top and combat boots, his jacket draped over his shoulders. The finish line is 500 meters away, Dennis said. But since you have energy, everyone drop and give me 200 push-ups. Ryan turned pale. We all dropped to the mud. Ryan tried to fake it, his arms shaking. Dennis walked over and kicked Ryan in the waist. Standard form. You want to be the top Omega with that effort. Professor, my arm is hurt, Ryan whimpered. How? Dennis asked. You ate 2 chocolate bars and can't do a push-up? How did you hurt your arm? Ryan stammered. George spoke up. He cut his arm to summon us to save Jason. We'll review the footage later, Dennis said. For now, I didn't say stop. Add 200 more. Ryan was lazy. Add 200 for him too. George tried to protest, releasing his pheromones. Dennis kicked George in the shoulder, sending him flying into the mud. Add 400 for you. I finished my 200. I rasped, standing up. Can I go? Dennis looked me up and down. His dark eyes softened imperceptibly. I grabbed the team badge from Lucas's pocket and sprinted toward the finish line. My back felt like it was on fire. Blood soaked through my shirt, mixing with the rain and releasing the scent of oud wood. I crossed the line and collapsed. But I didn't hit the ground. I fell into a warm, solid embrace. A jacket smelling of kerosene was thrown over me. Congratulations, student, Dennis whispered in my ear. You took first place. But I have a complaint. You smell like that Omega stink. If I smell it on you again, I'll punish you until your legs give out. I leaned into him, feeling safe. George arrived moments later. He saw us hugging. He saw the way Dennis looked at me. He understood. 5 minutes later, I pushed Dennis away. Ryan had finally arrived, smiling his perfect, fake smile. Did we win? I knew we were the best. I grabbed him by the collar and dragged him to the edge of a steep, muddy slope. I tolerated you to finish the mission, I said. You accused me of abandoning teammates. But you tricked me into a pit. You wanted me dead. I kicked him down the slope. I won't abandon a comrade, I shouted after him. But having you as a comrade is a humiliation. Ryan broke 3 ribs. I spent a week in the hospital. Dennis covered it up. From then on, the rumor that Dennis and I were dating became public. To save face, I went to his office every week to bite him. He seemed to enjoy it. My little boyfriend, he would call me in class. During his rut, I stayed in his office. I wore his oversized shirts and sat on his lap, biting him until the air was thick with our scents. On my 22nd birthday, at midnight, George appeared at the office door with a melted ice cream cake. Jason, he choked out. We promised to spend every birthday together. I buried my face in Dennis's chest. Make him leave. Student George, Dennis said, tapping the desk. Get out. My lover is in his sensitive period. George dropped the cake and fled, weeping. Before graduation, our team was sent to the front lines for an internship. When we arrived at the base, an attack was already underway. The commander had minutes to brief us. You're Jason? The commander asked, pausing. Your father was a top mechanic here. He died on this field. I nodded. The situation is critical, the commander said. I need a mechanic to cross the blockade. Solo mission. I'll go, I said immediately. Ryan stepped forward. I'm an Omega. Shouldn't an Alpha go? The commander slapped him. My base has no room for cowards. You chose this path. We deployed. For hours later, an explosion rocked the sector. Ryan screamed over the comms and cut the connection. I found George bleeding out in the rubble. Jason, George gasped, holding my hand. The base is gone. If I die here with you, I have no regrets. In the end, our blood will mix. I punched him. You idiot. I'm going to finish the mission and go home. Suddenly, my headset crackled. A signal override. Mechanics team, report, a familiar, husky voice said. Dennis. I whispered. He guided me through the fire, giving me coordinates. I was a commander in the battle where your father died. He revealed over the static. I've watched you for a long time. Jason, come back to me. I'm waiting for your answer. I dragged George back to safety. I completed the mission. Ryan? He tried to flee with a refugee convoy, but was recognized and shamed. He tried to trade secrets with the enemy, but went into heat and was captured. Years later, I inherited my father's call sign. George dropped out and went into business, refusing all partners, still waiting for a ghost. It was New Year's Eve at the base. Commander Dennis was storming through the halls, looking for me. He found me in the repair bay, tightening a bolt on a mech. He scooped me up. Happy New Year. I'm here to collect my gift. I'm working. I laughed. He kissed me, deep and possessive. Our phones buzzed. A news alert. Traitor Ryan extradited. He faced life in prison. He had birthed 4 children in captivity, exhausting his legal protection. Dennis frowned at the interruption. Ignore it. The alarm sounded for a sortie. I tapped his nose. Duty calls, Commander. Rain check on the gift. I ran toward the hangar. When the sun rises, we fight. When it sets, we love. And that was enough.